Good evening, everybody. It's exactly 7:30, so we're just going to kick it off. I don't think we're going to take the full hour today because this chapter is actually split into two different parts just to help the understanding. I just want to also note that I know your assignments due at the end of the month, so I will be uploading the assignment template for assignment 2 so that you guys have enough time, not so pressurized the way it was with assignment 1. And then we will work through the assignment once we're done with chapter 7, because chapter 7 is learning unit 6, but it's split into two different parts. So to start off with, the theory of demand, okay, and the utility approach. So you can understand that if we're already starting with the theory of demand, it's based on demand, which means that, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, right? So the entire process is based on demand itself. And in understanding the law of demand as well, which basically says that you must be willing and able. So you can't just demand a product, you must have the means to actually purchase said product. And then it's tied to consumer satisfaction, meaning you're not going to purchase a product, or consumers will not purchase a product if it's not going to give them some level of satisfaction. Okay. So just to break it down, we're going to break it down into different concepts, one being utility, marginal utility, total utility, and just to add in there is cardinal utility and ordinal utility as well. Your consumer equilibrium, and then how do you derive then your demand curve? So we might not get to the consumer equilibrium and then the demand curve. That might only come in part 2. Okay. So we will define utility itself. What is marginal utility? What is weighted marginal utility? Explaining the relationships between total utility, your average, and then your marginal variables, and then also state the conditions for consumer equilibrium. So that's the part that we'll get to in the second part, which will be next week, and then the use of marginal or weighted marginal utility as well. Okay. So to start off with, what we are basically saying is, in plain English, it's the degree of satisfaction that households or consumers derive or expect to derive from the consumption of a good or a service. So basically, what we're saying is, how much satisfaction do you gain from the consumption of the product that you're looking at? So, for example's sake, our aim as consumers is always to maximize our satisfaction or our level of satisfaction, okay, or the degree of satisfaction. So you are instinctively not going to purchase a product if there isn't that possibility of you maximizing your level of satisfaction. Okay, so I usually tell the students as well, you can think of it if it's a hot summer's day, or like the weather's turning a little bit on our end at this point in Gauteng. So if the weather's turning now and it's getting a little bit colder, and now we're running more towards, the caffeines, your coffees and your teas of the world. So if the weather's like super, super cold, and you take that first sip of coffee, that first sip of coffee is going to give you probably the highest level of satisfaction, or even that cup, depending on if you're a coffee addict or not. But that first mug of coffee is going to give you such a high level of satisfaction. That's basically what you are chasing every time you consume a cup of coffee. But you can also understand that once you go through the day and you have a second cup or a third cup or a fourth cup for that matter, you're never going to obtain that same high level of satisfaction the way you did the first cup of the day. And that's what utility is about. We're physically saying consumers want to maximize their level of satisfaction based on how you consume these goods. That's what we are constantly chasing. But in understanding that we're also trying to do that while staying within our budget. So still applying the law of demand. You must be willing and able. Okay, so we're trying to stick within our budget to maximize our total level of satisfaction. And we call that concept of actually putting a number to a level of satisfaction. So for example's sake, that first cup of coffee, right? If I had to give that a value out of 10, most people would say it would be 11, for example. Well, 10 is the maximum, but some people are coffee addicts, so they'll say it's probably 20 to them. Okay. But that second level or that second cup of coffee that you consume will never give you that same level of satisfaction. It will probably be an 18. It's still high, but it's never going to be the same level of satisfaction as the first cup. And then third cup will be slightly lower, fourth cup slightly lower, and that's what we mean. You chasing that high level of satisfaction that the whole time in consuming goods and services. Okay, so basically we're making the assumption here that consumers will attempt to maximize the level of satisfaction or their wants given their means at their disposal. So we're always trying to stay within our means, because remember, as consumers, we have a lot of wants. Okay, we all have that, but you must have the means to satisfy those wants. Okay, otherwise it's just a want. We all want to drive a GTI or a BMW or Mercedes-Benz or these luxury vehicles, but we don't all have the means to satisfy that want. Okay, so we're saying consumers have a fixed budget, you have a fixed income every month. Okay, and we are trying to maximize our level of satisfaction given that budget that we have. Okay, in also understanding that we make the assumption as economists that consumers must spend all of their income. Okay, so you're trying to maximize your level of satisfaction given your budget by spending all your money. Okay, and they're saying that consumers will act consistently and rationally in their own best interest, in understanding that we will consistently make the same choices. We unfortunately are creatures of habit. Economics is a social science, so we're constantly looking at how consumers behave consistently. And rationally, if it gets cold, we will drink coffee. If it gets hot, we will drink Coca-Cola or Fanta or something else to cool us down. Okay, we are acting rationally. We will act consistently the whole time. And that's how businesses then predict our behavior, because we're constantly acting rationally, if I can put it that way. Okay. Then, like I said, we're going to drill it down a little bit more. And we're saying there's cardinal utility and there's ordinal utility. So cardinal utility, the easiest way of saying that is if you had a bundle of goods or services, okay, that you're looking at, you are able to rank those goods in order of preference. Okay. Obviously, the goods that you deem are going to give you the highest level of satisfaction, you will rank that higher than other goods. So for example, say you have a basket of goods, you have your basket of groceries every month that you purchase from your Pick n Pay or wherever the case may be. Okay. Now, some of us might not be vegetable lovers, but we are adults, so we know that we must consume vegetables because it's healthy for us. Might not like it, but we consume it nevertheless. Okay, so in my ranking, if I know that, my fruits, I prefer fruits over vegetables, so fruits for me will be higher in my ranking compared to vegetables, even though I know I have to consume it because it's healthy for me. Okay, so it's the ability to physically rank your preference based on the basket of goods that you have. Whereas cardinal utility is literally measuring the level of satisfaction that these products giving you. Okay, so each product is obviously going to give you a certain level of satisfaction. The actual measurement of that, the utility of that product is what cardinal utility measures, whereas ordinal utility is physically ranking them in order of preference. Okay. Then we have the concept of marginal utility. So the word marginal, another way of saying marginal is additional. Okay. So this concept of marginal becomes very important through the rest of the chapters. Okay. So marginal is the additional utility that consumers get from consuming one additional unit. You can see they keep repeating the word additional the whole time, unit of a good. Okay. So for example's sake, if you have your cup of coffee, that first cup of coffee, and like I said, you'd probably have a utility, if we had to give it utility out of 10, or the total value out of 10, you'd probably say it's a 10. Okay, if you're a coffee drinker, you'd say it's a 10. Now, when I consume that second cup of coffee, and I said the second cup of coffee only gave me a level of satisfaction of 8. Okay, in total, my utility is sitting at 18. The additional utility I got from consuming that one cup is 8. Okay, because initially I was at 10, now I'm at 18 with the second cup. So the additional utility I got, or the additional level of satisfaction I got from consuming one additional unit of that good. Okay, and that's your marginal utility. So it's that additional amount or level of satisfaction you gain from consuming one more of the same product. Whereas a weighted marginal utility is literally putting a weighting to it. So the easiest way I explain it to the students is your semester marks is broken up into your assignment 1, assignment 2, your ICE, and your exam. That is technically speaking a weighted, because each assessment has a certain percentage attached to it. That's what we mean by weighted marginal utility. Okay, it's putting a weighting to the level of satisfaction. And then we look at it from a context of the price of the product. Okay. Whereas your total utility, you're literally just summing up the total amount of satisfaction that you're receiving from consistently consuming more and more of a product. Okay. In understanding that, eventually you will get to, or consumers in general, you're going to get to a stage. Now, the coffee addicts will probably fight me on it to say they never get to that stage of saying no more coffee. But eventually, towards the end of the day, you're going to say, okay, I cannot consume any more coffee. Then it becomes a thing of, is it now a positive aspect in your life or is it not? Because that's where you're at. So you're constantly chasing this level of satisfaction, and eventually you're not satisfied anymore. Okay. And then you become almost disutility. You're in a form of disutility then, because you're not gaining any more level of satisfaction. Okay. Let's jump very quickly there. So basically let me see if it will click. There it goes. It does click. So basically here in this example, we're saying there's a number of apples consumed. Okay. So 1 to 9. The first apple that you consume gives you the highest level of satisfaction. Okay. So in this case, that first level of, or the first apple that you consume gives you a level of satisfaction of 50. So you can see the marginal amount, or the marginal utility, as well as our total utility, is exactly the same for the first apple. Okay. When you consume, though, that second apple, like I said to you, the second item of any product, if you're consuming it within the same time frame, will never give you the same level of satisfaction, that high satisfaction, the way the first one did. So consuming that second apple now only gave you an additional, remember marginal means additional, level of satisfaction of 35. So in total, your total utility for the consumption of apples is 85. Okay, in adding the 50 and the 35, you get 85. Okay, then you get to that third apple. Now the third apple gives you a marginal utility, an additional level of satisfaction that you gain from consuming one more of that product of 29. Okay, my total utility is again the 85 plus the 29 gives me 114, and then so forth and so forth. But what you can see is the higher the level, the more you consume of a product, the lower your marginal utility becomes, okay? Until eventually you're getting to a stage of 0, which means you're not gaining any more satisfaction in the consumption of this product. So getting to 8 apples, and I know it's not realistic because nobody eats 8 apples, but if you use cups of coffee, I think you'd have a different outcome. But in getting to 8 apples, eating 8 apples, that 8th apple actually gave you no level of satisfaction whatsoever. And you would then consume, logically you wouldn't, but consume that 9th apple and your utility actually becomes negative. So there, I tend to tell the students that think of it in a concept of also consuming beer, for example. Eventually, you're going to get to a stage of you are now sick, which is essentially what we're saying. You become sick in the consumption of so much of the same product within the same time frame. You become sick. And then you are in disutility. Your utility is actually negative. There is no level of satisfaction that you're gaining anymore. And then your total utility starts to decrease. Okay. Just want to show you from a total, this is the marginal, that's the total utility. So you see total utility, it increases quite steeply. So this is another concept that we talk about in economics is it increases, is the concept of increasing at an increasing rate. And then, so here it's increasing from 1 to 2, the consumption of 1 apple to the consumption of 2 apples. It increases quite steeply. So it's increasing at an increasing rate. Okay. Then the consumption of that third apple still increasing at an increasing rate, but you can see there it's getting less. Okay. So then when you get to 3 to 4 apples, or even 3 to 4 and then 4 to 5 apples, it starts to increase at a decreasing rate. And you can see 6 to 7 is quite closely related as well. Okay. Then it starts to increase at a decreasing rate. Eventually, it becomes the same. So there we are at 152. It becomes the same. And then it starts to decrease. Okay, so when you explain it in, if you get asked, because I haven't looked at the assignment yet, but if you get asked to explain the relationship between total or a marginal utility or total utility, you have to start using the concepts of increasing at an increasing rate, and then it starts to increase at a decreasing rate, and then it balances out, so it remains constant, and then it starts to, or it hits its peak, and then it starts to decrease. Okay. And then if it's decreasing, it's decreasing. You can say it's decreasing at a decreasing rate, and that's fine. Okay. And then we always, you know how economists are, so we always tie everything back to equilibrium. Okay, so everything, consumers have to be in equilibrium. We must be able to obtain our highest level of utility, our total utility. We want our total utility to constantly be high. In understanding that also in the concept of equilibrium, that must balance out with our means, meaning our income. It must be within our budget. Then we are in equilibrium. If we have obtained our highest level of satisfaction and it's within our budget, we are in consumer equilibrium in terms of the utility approach. Okay. So now we're looking at the scale, right? So in this example, it's on 158 in your textbooks. You can see there we have this basket of goods. It's a little bit small on my side, but we have this basket of goods. So we have bread and we have, obviously the prices are very unrealistic. We wish we are paying that amount, but we have bread, we have meat. So there you can see the price of bread is 1 rand. We have meat, which is the price of meat, 3 rand. And then we have rice, price of 2 rand. Okay. So we're saying based on the price of the product, this is now our level of satisfaction that we are obtaining from the consumption of these products. So we are trying to match it to be in consumer equilibrium. So you can see there, if we're looking at our total, our marginal utility, so there we are. We're trying to see a number where you can see there, it's actually in bold a little bit. There's a 30. So in the consumption of 5, I want to say loaves of bread or slices of bread. There's a 30 as well. So that's 1 unit of meat. And there's a 30 again, and that's 2 units of bread. In understanding that they didn't actually state what the budget was. Okay, because that's the important thing. They have to tell you, consumers are trying to maximize their level of satisfaction given their budget. Okay, here they're just trying to tell you that we're trying to maximize our level of satisfaction based on our weighted marginal utility. Okay, but in essence, the important part of it is this, like this working example now, where you can see you get given a budget of 12 rand. Okay, and that can be your income, for example's sake. Now they're saying bread is at 1 rand per unit, meat is at 3 rand per unit, rice is at 2 rand per unit. So what combination, right? Because we have this basket we want to fulfill, we want to maximize our satisfaction here. So what combination of these 3 products can you get based on the 12 rand that you have, based on the total budget that you have? Okay, so we're saying in terms of bread, we could look at possibly, 5 units, the 5th unit of bread at 30, because remember it was in bold, right? With your total utility being 110. I see my circles are off here a little bit. So we're looking at here trying to maximize our level of satisfaction. So they said if Winnie consumes, or the slides are not doing it for me, but essentially if Winnie consumes 10 units of bread, 10 units of meat, and 10 units of rice, what will her total utility be? So we're just adding up her utility, which is great. She's going to maximize her utility because that's her aim. The problem is, does she have the means to satisfy that? So she still only has 12 rand. So if we had to say she's already out of her budget, because if you multiply 1 rand by 10, you're going to get 10. 3 rand by 10 is 30. That's already 40 rand. Okay. 2 by 10, that's 20 rand. She's already at 60 rand if she consumes or purchases 10 units of each of the products to get to this level of this total level of satisfaction being the 1,155 utils. We call them utils for utility. Okay, but it's completely outside of her means. So it's not a viable option for her given her budget. Okay. So our aim here, okay, is to try and stick, and that's what I say to you. If she only has 12 rand, she can't afford to spend 60 rand, even if that's what her aim is. We all have unlimited wants, but we only have limited means to satisfy those wants. Okay, so you have to make conscious decisions, rational decisions to stick within your means. So you will adapt your purchasing accordingly to match your budget to still try and maximize your level of satisfaction here. Okay. We discussed that. So I looked at it and I said, okay, so what combinations, given this full table, what combinations could she possibly have? Because there's multiple ways to look at it. Okay. Could she then look at to say, will she maximize her level of satisfaction? So we're saying at which quantities are the weighted marginal utilities equal to each other? Okay, so we can look at option A. There's 6. Okay, so 9 units of bread, 9 units. So now we're looking at the weighted marginal utilities being equal to each other. Okay, so there you can see right at the bottom is the 6. There we are. Okay, so 6, 6, and 6. So that is 9 units of bread, 9 units of meat, 12 units of rice. Still not. Things should still be outside of a budget if that was the case. Okay. There we have a 12 as well. Okay. But in understanding that 12 again would be 8 units of bread, 7 units of meat, and then again 8 units of rice. Again, she's outside of her budget. There's an 18 as well. So that's 7 units of bread, 5 units of meat, and then 6 units, if I'm looking, yes, 6 units of rice. Again, she's outside of her budget. There's a 24 as well. That's 6 units of bread, 3 units of meat, and then 4 units of rice. We're getting closer. And then there's the 30. There's 5 units of bread. Where am I now? 1 unit of meat and 2 units of rice. That seems like a better option. Okay, because 5 units of bread will cost 5 rand because it's 1 unit of bread, plus the 3 rand for the 1 unit of meat, and then the 4 rand, okay, will give you, well, 2 units of rice. That's 4 rand. Adding all of that together, she's sticking within her budget. Okay, so she's still gaining a level of satisfaction. That's what we're trying to ascertain is, regardless of the combination, she is getting a level of satisfaction. Consumers just want to maximize that by also spending their total level of income. Okay. We spoke about a lot of this. Okay. The main concept here, and it's going to be spoken about in so much detail going forward. Okay, so all of the future topics or chapters, there will be an aspect of diminishing something, and it's always diminishing marginal in this case because this chapter is on utility. So it will be the law of diminishing marginal utility. What I like about it is actually in the wording itself tells you what it's about. So diminishing means it decreases. Marginal means additional. Utility means level of satisfaction. Okay, so marginal, the law of a diminishing marginal utility states that the marginal utility declines as more of the good is consumed. Diminishing, it decreases. Marginal, the additional unit. So for every additional unit you consume, your level of satisfaction will decrease. Okay. And logically speaking, the more of a good that you consume in a short time frame, okay, we're not looking at this time frame of saying it's a week or no, I'm saying in a day. If you're consuming, like we're saying, the hamburgers, the more you consume, more hamburgers you consume, the less the level of satisfaction you're going to get until eventually you become sick. And then you are in disutility. Okay. think we explained this. So we know where the law of demand comes into play, right? So we're saying the law of demand is basically how much of a good are we demanding as consumers at every given price level, okay? In understanding that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. But now, how does that then fit into your consumer equilibrium? So also understanding that consumer equilibrium and equilibrium on its own are two separate concepts now, okay? When we are in equilibrium, that means our quantity demanded and our quantity supplied in the market is equal, okay, at a given price level. But that's more of an industry, from an industry perspective, what we are demanding as consumers and what producers are willing to sell at that given price. We are in equilibrium with one another. Now we're saying, how does that then fit into consumer equilibrium? In understanding that consumer equilibrium is about the level of satisfaction that we are obtaining from the consumption of these goods. Okay. So you're kind of matching that concept together. And we'll do that in the next, it's in part 2, where we're saying we have a budget now, and we've spoken a little bit about it now, but we have a budget and we're trying to maximize our level of satisfaction in understanding that that also creates a demand curve. Okay. So here again, another example, we're saying the price of chocolate is 2 Rand, price of yogurt is 3 Rand, Helen's budget is 10 Rand. So what combinations here could Helen possibly look at where she is maximizing her utility while sticking within her budget? So we said again, we look at her weighted marginal utility. So if you look at it, there's a 5, just want to do it before the slides will run away from me. There's a 5 over there. There's a 5 over there. My eyesight. There's a 10. Okay. I think those are the only two numbers I can see. So 5 and 10. So if we're looking at it from a budget perspective, at 4 units, that's 8 Rand. Okay. Here's 5 again, but that's 5 units. So 5 times 3 is 15. So 25. She's out of her budget. Okay. But if we look at 10, okay, 10 is luckily 2 and 2. So it's 2 units of chocolate, that's 4 Rand, plus the 2 units of yogurt, that's 6 Rands, because 2 times 3, that gives you 6, 10 Rand. Bob's your uncle. She's sticking within her budget and she's maximizing her level of satisfaction. Okay. So the main aim here is, one, you are sticking within the budget or consumer's budget. And 2, you're still maximizing your level of satisfaction. They're not too phased. I know in the textbook, they speak a lot about your total utility. But the main idea that we're looking at here is your marginal utility, the additional level of satisfaction you're gaining from consuming one more unit of a product. The total utility, yes, it plays into part, but we're more concerned with the individual utility you are obtaining while you are consuming these goods, okay, in trying to stick to your budget. So we're saying here, what happens then if chocolate now falls to 1 Rand? So chocolate becomes more expensive. It was 2 Rand, it's now 1 Rand. Now, how does that then change up? Because that's realistically what constantly keeps happening, where you have a unit or a basket of goods every month, okay? Now you get to the Pick n Pay, Checkers, Woolworths, whatever the case may be, and now it's cheaper because that's how they catch you, right? It becomes cheaper. So then what happens? Are you then going to instinctively buy more of the product because now it's cheaper? And logically saying, yes, we do. That's what consumers do. My initial budget was 2 Rand. So that was initially part of my budget. But now if it goes down to 1 rand, I can double the volume of goods that I consume. Okay, so if then the chocolate falls, the price of chocolate now falls, there I can now purchase 4 units of chocolate and then still 2 units of yogurt, and I'm still within my budget. Okay, so that's instinctively what and I know logically speaking, when we go to stores, that's not how we think about it, but that's the principles of utility in application. Okay, so in our monthly budgets and how we think about things, and it's not logically how we think about things, but in the principles of economics, that's what's happening. Okay, so we're saying, what does it mean? Basically, Helen will then increase her utility by consuming a greater quantity of chocolates when the price of chocolates falls, and ceteris paribus. Okay, meaning nothing else changes. So only the price of chocolates changed. Her budget didn't change. The price of yogurt or the alternative products hasn't changed either. Okay, then thinking of that in the principle of demand, where we're saying we must be willing and able, okay, but we want to maximize our utility. So a utility maximizing customer, we want to maximize our level of satisfaction, will demand a greater quantity of a product when the price of the product falls and nothing else changes. So ceteris paribus, essentially. And that's how our demand curve gets derived for that particular product. So demand right now is usually very subjective based on the consumer. So it's individual demand, not demand as a whole at this point. We're looking at each individual consumer because every single consumer has their own budget. Right. And that's essentially what we're saying. If we had to draw now Helen's demand curve for chocolates, we'd say it was 2 rand. It is now, and at 2 rand, she consumed, or she wanted or consumed 2 chocolates because that was within her budget. Now that the price of chocolates has fallen, Helen can now afford 4 chocolates. So that's her quantity demanded has now increased to 4. And essentially, if we had to draw the line, that would be Helen's demand curve for chocolates based on her budget. Okay. And that is it for today. Right. So we'll call it a day today. The lecturers themselves have been struggling heavily I'm just going to stop the recording. The lecturers have been struggling quite heavily with